Thanks, Ivan. Thanks for inviting me to present today. So my name's Anne Gardner. I'm actually at the University of Technology, Sydney. The University of Sydney is about 500 metres up the road, and we do talk to each other, but we are on different campuses. So I'm the incoming Associate Dean Teaching and Learning here at UTS. So anyone who may know Rob Jarman, he has decided to move on to the next phase of his life. He'll actually be leaving the university, and so I'm taking over that role. And as Ivan said, I'm also at the moment president of A Squared E Squared. So what I thought I would do today in this presentation is talk about frameworks. So we often use frameworks in our research, but we also have frameworks, or like curriculum related frameworks. We can use them in our teaching or curriculum development as well. So typically in a research project, we use the framework to provide structure to our research project. It tends to define what might be in scope and what might be out of scope. It defines the dimensions or the variables, parameters that we're interested in, and often what the relationships are between those dimensions. And so it helps us in deciding what our research question is, in deciding what our data collection method might be, and also guides us in analysis. And it's a similar sort of thing with frameworks for teaching and learning. Connects you, the teaching professional, to an existing body of knowledge around teaching and learning. It tells you what the major dimensions or variables might be. It helps you remember to include everything so you don't forget one aspect. And also what the relationships are between those variables. Now, there's a few different types of frameworks, and I'm going to present today two of my favorite frameworks. One is for like a whole curriculum or a whole program view, and the other is very much at the perspective of the individual student. So they're quite different levels. The frameworks are operating at quite different levels. So again, when we choose a framework, we have to choose one that's actually going to help us achieve the objectives that we're interested in. So the first framework that I want to look at is the connected curriculum framework. If I can get this link to work, it goes to the site where you can download the PDF, and I'm going to try to stick the link in the chat box so you can get it from there. So Dilly Fung authored that report, which presented this connected curriculum framework. So I'm a bit of a fan, I have to admit. She was at University College London when she wrote this book. She has now moved to the London School of Economics, and I've actually visited her there. So this connected curriculum is not about the types of connections that you might get in your phone or telecommunications. It's about a curriculum that tries to connect the student to multiple influences on their professional development. So we'll have a look at the framework. One of the other nice things about this framework is that it presents as a flower rather than just a list of things. So this is about connecting students with the discipline, with each other, and with the major thinkers in the discipline. You can see there that it's talking about learning through research and inquiry. So we've got the numbered petals. So the first thing there is students connect with researchers and with the institution's research. So this is about trying to help students see what are the current major issues within their discipline. So researchers tend to be people who are wrestling with problems at the edge of the discipline or significant for the discipline. So helping students connect with those issues is about immersing them in the discourse of their discipline and the concepts of the discipline. It's also good for developing a sense of maybe thinking about, is this a potential career trajectory for me? Probably not at the moment, because most universities are not employing additional academics. They're trying to get rid of academics, but anyway. It's still a good thing to connect the students with what's happening in research studies. And that's about being able to critique what's happening in their discipline. We might just keep, this is an example of connecting communities with a particular research project. So individuals in the community were asked to record any frog songs or frog noises that they heard, and then they could submit them to the website. And that's about building up a map of frog populations. So the researchers were able then to find that there were still frogs in some areas they thought that they weren't existing. So that was a good thing. So the type of connection that we make doesn't always have to be at a really advanced level. And this sort of connection also helps our researchers better articulate what it is they're actually working on, because they have to make it accessible to the people that they're talking to. Something a little bit closer to home is, this is Professor David Eager in the mechanical school here at UTS. He has a large body of research around play equipment. He's on various standards, Australia boards or committees. And what he's holding there is a model of a skull to do a head impact test for testing playground surfaces. And so he was very kindly agreed to be videoed so that I could incorporate the work that he's doing into part of an assignment in first year mechanics, because the head impact test does rely on some basic dynamics relationships. And that sort of relates to the next part of the framework, which is building a line of research activity through each program. So you do a bit in first year, you might develop something to another aspect of research in second year, third year, and develop it up into fourth year. So the whole research is not, or research can be broken down into into various phases. So you don't have to present the whole lot in 1 year. You can get them to do various phases of the research in various years. Now, I know a lot of different universities do this anyway, and especially try to connect the students with researchers through, for example, maybe a summer taste of research program, or by connecting PhD students with students as well. That would be another way to do it. So we're connecting with the researchers, building a thread of research activity all the way through our program, and actually building that research thread aligns really nicely with trying to achieve an AQF8 engineering program. Excuse me. The next petal round, we've got students make connections across subjects and out to the world. So this is where we help students make those connections to help make meaning of what they're learning in this particular subject. So this might be a project that's run with maybe another faculty. For example, you could have a co-curricular activity with the business faculty maybe. So you've got students in groups from various disciplines working together. To do that, students have to think about, well, I'm in engineering, so what does it mean to actually be an engineer? And it's not just setting up the assessment task, but it's also building in the feedback opportunities to help students be able to articulate and think about their engineering skills. Okay, the next one round, we've got students connect academic learning with workplace learning. And you'll probably immediately think of internships here, and that would be your classic example of making that connection between the classroom and the workplace, preparing the student for professional practice. But the other way is also possible. It's not just about sending students out to the workplace, but it's also about bringing practitioners into the university. And again, there's various ways of doing that, not just the ubiquitous guest lecture, but having practitioners involved in setting up a problem for students to work on, or one of our subjects works a bit on a Shark Tank type model. So practitioners come in and they form the judging panel for the students, so that the students at the end of the semester pitch their idea and the practitioners provide feedback and a judgment on that work. Because it's coming from professionals in industry, students see it as having relevance and having currency that they may not necessarily associate with an academic. So it tends to make more of an impact. But again, there's a variety of ways that you can achieve that. Associated with that is the next petal round, we've got students learn to produce outputs. So again, if we're thinking about creating authentic assessment tasks for our students, then we have to know what they are. What are the ways that engineers, what are the types of artifacts that engineers create in practice? And providing students with a variety of opportunities throughout their program to sometimes write a report, to sometimes present to a board, to another time have to create a video for community engagement, allows them to develop their communication skills. So high levels of communication skills are associated with being able to mold the message to the audience that are involved. It also makes it a bit more interesting for academics too, if they've got different sorts of assessment tasks to deal with. The next pedal round and sort of closing the loop on this framework, we've got students connect with each other across various stages of their program and also with alumni. Now, often this will be through co-curricular activities. For example, here at UTS, we've got the UTS Motorsports. So they're building their racing car, and there are students from various stages of both the engineering, but also I think the business faculty as well. So in those sorts of activities, students get a chance to talk to students at other stages. That helps build a sense of community in the faculty, well, within the discipline. It helps with students being able to see themselves in these other students that might be just a little bit ahead of them. So the idea of developing a future self is built into that sort of interaction. There are other ways we can do this too. So for example, we run the peer assisted study scheme here, where we have students who have performed well in a subject and who've undergone some training in how to facilitate student groups working together. They will become the leaders of the peer assisted study scheme for that subject in subsequent semesters. So again, we've got senior students interacting with more junior students. In our professional practice program, we have a forum at the end of the program. So our senior students are asked to reflect back on their industry experiences and what they've actually learned from those experiences. And we also have junior students in that same forum. So they can hear what the senior students have done, where they've done it. They can help to build networks. So networks amongst students form the foundations of professional networks. So that's the connected curriculum. I'm going to skip through because I've already talked about most of these. So we've got the dimensions of the framework. And when I run workshops on this curriculum framework, I ask people to think about what activities can be connected to one of these dimensions, because I'm certain that there are multiple activities and types of activities that are run at your university that would fit somewhere into that framework. But what the framework allows us to do is to then interrogate our programs and say, well, which dimensions have few activities that relate to them? And that's the areas of improvement for our program. Maybe we don't have as many opportunities for students to talk to researchers as what we could have. So that becomes the focus of how do we strengthen the links in that area? How do we strengthen the connections so that our whole curriculum becomes more connected? And this is what frameworks help us do. They help us interrogate our own programs to improve them. So that's one framework that's obviously operating at the whole of program level. It's about a framework that's aimed at developing skills in students of inquiry, but also recognizing they need to develop their professional identity. And so connecting the students with various parts of the profession. we want students to identify with the profession of engineering, not just get a job as an engineer. So that's our first framework that we're going to look at today. This is our beautiful new building. So we have the brown paper bag at UTS. We have the cheese grater, which is the engineering building, and we now have the wedding cake, which is our UTS Central. So I'm hoping that one day you will be able to visit our campus when we're allowed to travel again. Our second framework that I'm going to talk about today is Clara, and the first framework we looked at, the connected curriculum, was courtesy of Dilly Fung. Clara is courtesy of Ruth Crick. And drum roll to see if the connection will work again. So this is the connection, well, this is the connection for the Clara. So I'll pop that in the chat as well. So you can look at that in more detail at your leisure. Okay, so Clara has had various incarnations, I suppose. It started as a survey looking at or asking respondents to reflect on attributes that contributed to lifelong learning skills. And then it developed into something much more focused around, well, what are the various attributes that I need to develop if I'm going to be the best learner that I can possibly be? So it is about providing support to students to think about their approach to learning and to think about all the different things they've got to be strong at, or all the different attributes they need to develop to be the best learner they can possibly be. The framework has been applied across a range of different contexts. So it's been applied in a primary school level. Obviously, the way the different dimensions have been described is different at primary school level to high school, to higher education context. It's also been used as a professional development tool with Hunter Waterboard. So it's been used across the whole spectrum of learners from primary school through to the professional practice environment. And the various dimensions of it look like this. So these are the various aspects of an individual that that Crick is saying need to be strengthened if someone's going to be the best learner they can possibly be. And she refers to learning power. I think they've actually rebranded this now as learning journeys. So there's a little bit more induction and a bit more at the end, interacting with an individual's profile, but the core of it is still this framework. And each individual's profile is going to be different. So there's a series of behavioural related questions that help to establish what that individual's profile is. So you can see up the top here, we've got mindful agency. And that's all about the executive function, planning, how do I manage my learning, but also how do I manage my feelings about the learning, which is a little bit of, a lot of engineering students have a bit of a struggle with, even having to name various emotions. But but how we feel about something will often influence how we go about interacting with it. It's also about how do we take, building on that word agency, what are my intentional actions with respect to the learning? This also, one of the underlying assumptions is that a student is responsible for their own learning. That's a bit of a surprise to some students too, but anyway. As we go clockwise round, you can see the next one, the next dimension is sense making. So that's about the student making connections with new material and what they already know, between material in this area and material in another area. So it's about them joining all the dots together, essentially. Creativity is what it is what it sounds like, and it isn't. It's not about can they produce a wonderful sculpture or fine work of art. In engineering, it's about creative problem solving, and maybe sometimes having a playful attitude to the question. This is about thinking of different ways of solving the problem. So creative problem solving, lateral thinking, that all comes into the creativity. Curiosity, I say, is about releasing the inner toddler. If you've spent much time with a toddler, you will know that they're often asking why. Why is it like that? Why do we have to do that? Why do I have to hold your hand when we cross the road? So that why really drives a lot of their interaction. And we want students in learning to maintain that level of curiosity. One of the key attributes of researchers, of course, is curiosity as well. How can you ask questions if you don't have any curiosity? So most of these attributes relate, they're personal and they're about the individual. But there's the next two, belonging and collaboration, are about relationships with other people. So the first one, belonging, is feeling like I belong in an engineering program, essentially. So I'm in the right place. I've got people that I can rely on around me and relate to. And that helps with persevering in the program. So if someone feels like they belong somewhere, they tend to persevere with problems a little bit longer than someone who does not feel like they belong. And I think in the last year with COVID, that establishing a sense of belonging has been more difficult for some of our students. The next one around there you can see is collaboration, and that's about, well, how do I work with other people? We know in engineering teams, those collaboration skills are really important. And I need to be able to work with a variety of different people. So the collaboration is around how can I best utilize other people's skills to help me build my own skills to achieve what I want to achieve. And the people involved in collaboration are not necessarily, and in fact, probably not the same people that I would think of when I'm thinking of, this is my tribe, this is where I belong. The next attribute around there is hope and optimism. And that's about feeling like you can be successful. So there's a lot of overlap there, even with agency and motivation. So when a student is in our programs, we want them to feel like they can actually be successful. They will be able to finish. They will be able to get the type of job that they want to secure. Maybe not immediately, but eventually. when I ran this program with the Australian Council of Engineering Deans, I thought it was very interesting that their average level of hope and optimism was very low. It was actually lower than our first year student aggregate, which made me feel a bit sad for the deans. So next time you see your dean, maybe be a little bit sympathetic with their situation. They also rated quite low on collaboration and belonging. So anyway, the last aspect there is orientation to learning. And that's sort of a almost, you know, a spectrum. On one end, we've got people who are really risk averse, and I have absolutely no faith in my own judgment. And so I'm going to rely on what you tell me to do this extra little bit of increment of the work. And so when I've done that, I'll find someone else, or I'll come back to you and find out how to do the next increment of the work. So we're talking about incremental learners. They want to rely on other people's judgment, not their own judgment. At the other end of the spectrum, we've got people who are very close-minded. They can only see one way to solve a problem. So they will typically say things like, just tell me what the equation is. They're not interested in learning about other ways of approaching the problem because they know that one way, they've got confidence in that one way, and they want to get it over and done with as quickly as possible. Having somewhere in between is about exploring other approaches to learning. It's about listening to other people's perspectives, but also being able to articulate your own perspective. And it's about building on your own judgment and increasing your toolbox of solution strategies by learning about the way other people do it and being able to pull out the appropriate tool at the appropriate time. So if one way of learning doesn't work, it's not about giving up completely. It's about saying, well, if that didn't work, maybe I can try something else, and that will get me further in the towards the solution. So each individual student gets a profile which assesses where their strengths and weaknesses are around this framework. With the learning journey programs we have at UTS, they then have a coaching conversation about how they can develop the skills that they're not so strong in. And often it can be about using their strengths to help build up their weaknesses. I've got some slides which go through each of the aspects, but we've sort of talked about most of those. So we might just go to, so again, with the workshops on the Clara framework, they are workshops with individual students rather than with program academics. And for academics, I ask them to think about, well, what are the attributes that a student might develop in the learning activities in my subject? Do I get them to work together so they can develop collaboration skills? Do I get them to work in small groups so they might actually, in first year, for example, you know, make a friend? Do I set up a learning activity or have a piece of assessment that allows them to show some creativity in their problem solving? And flipping that question around the other way, if I particularly want them to develop an attribute, then what sort of learning activity should I include in my subject? So they're the questions for academics. For individual students, it's about what are the activities I need to engage in to develop, you know, whatever attribute they want to engage. What are the plans I have to make if I need to develop my mindful agency? How do I manage my time? How do I plan my activities to achieve what I want to achieve? So I know I've sort of done a quick run through both of those frameworks. The first one, the connected curriculum, was very much at a whole of program view. The Clara is about the individual student. So they're different levels of operating. But both of them create a structure for thinking about our whole program or our individual subject. And it's also about, well, I think what's common between the two of them is a focus on the experience of the student. So as I said, I know I've run through that pretty quickly, but I'm keen to get your questions and comments. But I've got a question to ask you first of all, and that is, what are some of the other curriculum frameworks that you know of or maybe have applied? So I don't know if you want to put that in the chat.
Thanks, and yeah, we can put it in the chat. Yeah, I just want to like make a comment like from like my side. Like I don't think we use like any of, well, I'm not sure. Well, I cannot speak for like again for everybody. I think we use like something similar, but we don't put it in the kind of like this like framework that you presented. So like your first framework, you said is more like for like a program level, right? And this is what we also do here at Griffith when we try to connect our students with the industry. We do it from like year 1, year 2, year 3, year 4. So like we try to incorporate these aspects of that framework, even though maybe we don't know like the name of that framework. Sorry, I didn't see that paper. But we're also doing like very similar things. And on top of that, we have in the final year for our students, we have for like one trimester, we have a course when they actually work in the industry, and then they would gain some experience, practical experience, and then they'll also conduct research based on the results that they get from the industry. So we see it as a milestone course in our program, and we're like really happy that we can offer this to students, because that will also like link the theory from the class to the like practice in the industry. Yeah. Second framework is also interesting. I think it's more kind of at the like maybe like course like unit level, right? Am I correct?
Well, it's more the individual, but for an academic, you'd be looking at, well,
yeah.
What do I do in my individual subject or
Yeah.
unit or
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, we well, probably I don't know if like any of our Griffith academics is familiar with this framework, but we do encourage our colleagues, you know, to aim at like those things that mentioned in the framework, you know, to like for like students like to work as a team, develop social skills, so that they can also like practice, and then they can communicate with each other, creativity, curiosity. So this is the kind of things maybe we don't really think about it when we create our, I mean, like we don't think about this framework when we create these assessment items for them, but we sort of like keep it in mind. So kind of subconsciously, we already know that we kind of need to do that. But yeah, I haven't heard about those frameworks. Sorry about that.
No,
Well,
that's
that
fine.
was like very good, like to like learn about new things. So and if you don't mind, I will just go through the questions and see what we have in the chat. So Rosalie say that's a very pretty flower image. Good to see something other than the three circles. It's useful to ask students what types of learning they're familiar with already and how they have been rewarded for particular approaches to learning in the past. Yeah,
Yeah.
so
So
it's a question.
yeah, I think for the with the Clara one, that's a really good question to ask them. And it would also be good for academics to listen to the students' answers as well, because if they've been rewarded by just regurgitating back what was in the lectures, or by putting numbers in, you know, the right spot in the equation and cranking the handle and getting the answer, well, then that's not necessarily testing their boundaries in terms of creativity and openness to learning. Hopefully they have had good learning experiences so that they can share those with other students at the same session. It also sensitizes them to there are different approaches to learning, which they may not have talked or thought about previously. So again, that's encouraging them to be reflective. And whenever we can build in reflective writing, that's helping to build that mindful agency aspect.
Thanks. There is another comment from Rosalie. They're saying that why I utilize the disturbed expertise model. I've never heard of this. So underpin the academic language development framework as a whole of institute. I'm just not familiar. Do you know this framework?
I don't, but there are lots of frameworks out there, and it's great to see a variety of different frameworks. So if you click on the link that Rosalie has kindly provided, you can see there's a lovely representation of the distributed expertise model. And again, I think because the program that that Rosalie's talking about there, the academic language development program, that involves the Central University, it involves academics in the faculties at various levels. And so there's a whole lot of different people that have to be involved in that program. And so I think that's why the distributed expertise model would work. So it is a program focused on developing communication skills. So that's one example of another great framework. And someone else has suggested the backwards design concept.
Concept, course, individual units, subject level.
So that's another framework. So thank you for presenting that. I mean, there's a design thinking is another framework that can be used for curriculum design as well. That's not what it was designed for, but you could use it for that purpose. So thank you for suggesting those two. Are there any other, does anyone else have any frameworks when you think of learning and teaching or curriculum or program design?
As already mentioned, at Griffith, we kind of want to see like good connection and link between theory and practice. So we would like to graduate industry ready like students so that they can go and already work in the industry. So we like for each year we have like program for 4 years. In each year we have a component related to the professional practice development. So like we start from like first year when we have site visits. Second year we also have site visits and we have guest lectures from the industry. Third year, I think we have something else. Sorry, I don't remember. I think probably like another. And fourth year, we have this like a whole trimester where students work in the industry and they just I develop also like networking for the future, develop skills, apply theory into practice. So this is how it works. Well, it probably like
So
looks like you have like something similar, right? You just sort of frame it.
yeah, well, we've got a framework for
Yeah.
that happening. So you'd be looking, I think, for a framework that relates to engagement with industry, but having a framework to use is a bit like a supporting structure. It helps, reminds you of all the bits that you got to think about so that you don't forget any. And it also helps you with evaluating your programs because you can evaluate against the framework. So I would suggest, as I said, with the connected curriculum, I'm sure there's people and places doing lots of activities that would fit into that framework. But it gives you a chance to then say, well, have we included everything? Have we forgotten something? And then have the conversation around, well, how can we do it better?
Definitely, this is a good thing for us to consider because, well, I'm not sure if we have a model like this concept of sorry framework. So, but definitely, I think it will be like nice to like sit down and look at what we're doing and see how it fit in like one of these frameworks. I'm sure it will fit in these frameworks. We just like
Yeah.
don't know like which one. Yeah. Probably like we haven't done this yet, I believe, but this is something to look forward to and like something to like do so that we can improve our curriculum and see like what we're doing really well or what's something maybe we can like improve a little bit more.
Yep.
And this is like very useful thing.
Yeah. I think too, if you want to engage in the scholarship of teaching and learning, if you want to write about your practices, then including a framework in your reflections is going to strengthen, you know, your submission to a journal or a conference. So that's another reason that I would encourage you to do it. If you're doing a research project, then of course you would have your research methodology, your theoretical perspective. If you're doing scholarship of teaching and learning, then you have the framework that you're going to use to frame your work. So Rosalie again has suggested CDIO. That's a curriculum framework that absolutely is a framework. It's particular for engineering. It's been around for a while, so there's lots of examples and there's a body of literature around CDIO that you could use. So that's a good one. That's another one I had in my head. I'm glad you can read my mind, Rosalie. And yep, I absolutely agree with your comment that having a framework demonstrates that you're open to evaluating what your current practices are. And showing that you are a reflective practitioner as well.
There is a comment from Sarah. Would you call constructive alignment a framework?
I wouldn't think of that so much as a framework. It's like a concept that we would apply to our subject design. So we absolutely want our assessment tasks to align with our learning activities that align with our learning objectives. So maybe at a unit level, it would frame part of what you're doing, but I wouldn't really think of it as a framework because it's so focused, where frameworks tend to be a little bit more general than that. I don't know if anyone else would like to comment on constructive alignment as a framework.
I would agree with you, Anne, and it's kind of focused, and it's also not broad enough. I mean, it's just sort of doing kind of one thing. So do these things line up? But it's not sort of incorporating a whole lot of other elements. So it probably doesn't have the robustness that you'd want in a framework.
Thank you.
I mean, not that it's not robust, but you know,
no,
not
and we absolutely want constructive alignment in our subjects or units. Even the Engineers Australia list of competencies, on one level, you could use them as a framework. It's a pretty boring framework, but it is a framework. And again, these are all ways to interrogate what you're currently doing to say, you know, are we covering everything we need to cover? Are we covering it well?
Yeah, thanks for this comment. And I think we're actually like about time to conclude. So if we don't have any more questions, anybody would like to ask a question? Well, there was like really good discussion about frameworks and like something for us to consider in our curriculum. Yeah, there is, that's the email address, yeah. Well, if no more questions, I would like to thanks Anne again for your time. Thanks again for presenting this very interesting talk on frameworks. So definitely this is something for us to talk about in our school and see like what we're doing and how it fits in one of those frameworks. And I just want to thank you, and I think we'll conclude the session. And I also want to thank everybody who joined the session. Thanks everybody, and have a nice day.
Thanks, Ivan. Thanks for inviting me. And it's great to be able to talk to people from different places.
Yeah, thanks, Annie. Thanks, everybody. So I'll just stop recording and end the session.
Okay, thank you.